The world is watching the wrong war. And while the media focuses on trade tariffs, currency fluctuations, and stock market volatility, a much quieter, deadlier conflict has just escalated in the shadows. It is a war that will not be fought with missiles or aircraft carriers. It will be fought with permits, refining quotas, and export licenses. It is the war for silver. For decades, the West has operated under a delusion. We believed that the global market was a supermarket. We believed that if we had dollars, we could buy whatever we wanted. We thought that if Samsung needed silver for a new battery or if Tesla needed silver for a solar roof, they could just swipe a credit card and the metal would arrive. That era is over. We are witnessing the rise of resource nationalism. This is a fancy term for a very simple, brutal reality. The countries that have the metal are stopping the countries that need the metal from getting it. China has just signaled a shift that changes the geopolitical map of the 21st century. Reports and policy shifts indicate that Beijing is moving to classify silver not as a precious metal, but as a strategic critical mineral. This classification gives the state the legal power to restrict export, seize inventory, and prioritize domestic industries over international buyers. Why now? Why silver? Because the technology has changed. As we discussed in our deep dive on the new battery technology, silver is no longer just money. It is the oxygen of the green economy. You cannot build a solid-state battery without it. You cannot build a TOPCon solar panel without it. You cannot build a 5G guidance chip without it. China knows this. China dominates the manufacturing of all three of those technologies. It produces 80% of the world's solar panels. It produces 70% of the world's batteries. They know that if they run out of silver, their dominance ends. So they are doing the logical thing. They are closing the gates. If you think this is speculation, look at the history. In 2010, China restricted rare earth exports to Japan over a fishing dispute. Prices spiked 2,000%. In 2023, they restricted gallium and germanium exports to the West, crippling the semiconductor supply chain overnight. Now, the crosshairs are on silver. In this massive multi-part investigation, we are going to expose the mechanics of this new resource war. We are going to look at the refinery choke point that gives China a stranglehold on the global market, even if they don't mine all the silver. We are going to explain how Mexico and Peru are likely to follow suit, creating a silver OPEC that holds the West hostage. And we are going to explain what this means for you, the individual holder. Because in a world where nations are hoarding metal, the person holding physical silver in their own safe becomes a strategic asset. The supermarket is closed. The blockade has begun. This is the story of the silver lockdown. To understand where we are going, we have to understand the arrogance that got us here. For 40 years, the Western financial system has treated commodities as inputs. They were cheap, abundant, and annoying. Bankers in London and New York preferred to trade paper derivatives, stocks, bonds, futures. They viewed the actual physical stuff, the copper, the oil, the silver as dirty, low-margin businesses that could be outsourced to the developing world. So we did. We shut down our smelters in the United States. We regulated our mines out of existence in Europe. We shipped the dirty work of refining and processing to China. We told ourselves we were upgrading our economy to services and tech. We thought we were smart. China took the deal. They took the pollution. They took the low wages, but they also took the control. While we were building apps, they were building smelters. While we were trading paper silver on the COMEX, they were accumulating physical silver in the Shanghai Gold Exchange. While we were selling our strategic stockpiles to balance budgets, they were buying mines in Africa and South America. Now the trap is sprung. The West has realized too late that you cannot build a digital economy without physical atoms. You cannot have an AI revolution without electricity, and you cannot have electricity without copper and silver. The green transition is fundamentally a transition from a fuel-intensive economy to a mineral-intensive economy. But the minerals are in the East and the processing capacity is in the East. China currently refines roughly 40% to 50% of the world's copper, lithium, and cobalt. Their grip on the silver processing chain is equally tightening. Even if the silver is mined in Mexico, much of the concentrate, the raw dirt, is shipped across the Pacific to be smelted in China. This gives Beijing a kill switch. If they decide to stop exporting refined silver bars, it doesn't matter how much ore Mexico digs up. If Mexico doesn't have the smelters to turn that ore into 999 fine bars, the supply chain stops. The West has almost zero excess smelting capacity. Building a new smelter takes 5 years and billions of dollars. We have voluntarily placed our head in the lion's mouth. And now the lion is closing its jaws. Let's look at the precedent. This is not a theory. This is a playback of what happened just 2 years ago with gallium and germanium. These are obscure metals, but they are critical for high-end semiconductors, radar systems, and military optics. For years, the US military relied on cheap supply from China. Then the US restricted China's access to advanced AI chips. How did China respond? They didn't fire a missile. They didn't sanction a bank. They simply announced that exporters of gallium and germanium would need a special license to ship the metal out of the country. Overnight, exports dropped to zero. Prices in the West doubled. The Pentagon scrambled. Defense contractors panicked. They realized they had no domestic source. This was a warning shot. China was demonstrating that they could turn off the lights in the Western defense industry whenever they wanted. Now apply that logic to silver. Silver is vastly more critical than gallium. Gallium is used in niche chips. Silver is used in everything. It is in every switch, every solar panel, every car, every missile, every hospital. If China restricts silver exports, they don't just hurt the military, they hurt the entire economy. They stall the Green New Deal. They crash the EV industry. They make it impossible for Apple to build iPhones. It is the ultimate leverage. And unlike gallium, where China produces most of it, the silver market is more complex. China produces silver, but they consume far more than they produce. They are a net importer. So, how can they block exports if they are an importer? This is the genius of the strategy. They absorb the global supply. They buy the concentrate from Peru and Mexico. They refine it and then they keep it. They don't ban the import, they ban the re-export. This turns the global flow of silver into a roach motel. The metal checks in, but it never checks out. It flows from the mines of the Americas into the factories of Asia and it stays there. The London vaults drain. The COMEX vaults drain. The West is left with paper contracts while the East holds the physical inventory. Why would China do this now? The answer lies in the sun. China controls over 80% of the global solar panel manufacturing supply chain. They produce the polysilicon, the wafers, the cells, and the modules. They are the Saudis of solar. But solar panels are hungry. As we discussed previously, the shift to TOPCon technology has increased the amount of silver needed per panel. The Chinese solar industry alone is consuming hundreds of millions of ounces of silver annually. If the global silver price spikes to $100 or $200 because of a shortage, Chinese manufacturers suffer. Their margins get crushed. They might lose market share to other countries if they have to raise prices. But if China restricts the export of silver, they create a dual price market. Inside China, silver remains available for their manufacturers. Outside China, silver becomes unobtainium. This gives Chinese solar companies a massive competitive advantage. They can get the metal. Western competitors like First Solar in the US or Mirror in Europe cannot. China subsidizes its own industry by starving its competitors of raw materials. It is a classic mercantilist strategy. It is exactly what the British Empire did with wool and cotton. It is exactly what the US did with oil in the 1940s. You secure the resource to secure the industry. This is why the rumors of an export ban are so credible. It aligns perfectly with China's industrial goals. They don't want to sell silver bars to investors in New York. They want to sell finished solar panels to governments in Europe. The value add is in the technology, not the metal. But to sell the technology, they must hoard the metal. We need to discard the idea of a global price for silver. For a century, we assumed that an ounce of silver in Shanghai cost the same as an ounce of silver in London. Arbitrage kept the prices linked, but export bans break arbitrage. If you cannot ship the metal out of China, the price in London can go to $100, while the price in Shanghai stays at $80. The markets delink. This creates extreme volatility and extreme danger for paper traders. If you are short silver on the COMEX and the COMEX runs out of metal because China stopped shipping, you cannot arbitrage your way out of it. You cannot buy cheap metal in Asia to deliver in New York. You are trapped in a local squeeze. This is what we are seeing signs of right now. The premiums in Shanghai have been consistently higher than New York for months. The metal is flowing east and staying there. The free market implies the free movement of goods. When the movement stops, the market is no longer free. It is a series of walled gardens, and inside the Western garden, the cupboards are bare. We sold our strategic stockpiles. We allowed our inventory to float away. Now, as the walls go up, we are realizing that we are on the wrong side of the blockade. In warfare, a choke point is a strategic narrow route providing passage through or to another region. Think of the Strait of Hormuz for oil or the Suez Canal for shipping. If you control the choke point, you control the flow. You don't need to own the oil fields. You just need to own the narrow strip of water. In the Silver War, the choke point is not a strait or canal. It is the smelter. Most investors make a fatal mistake. They look at a map of global silver production and they see Mexico, Peru, and Chile colored in green. They think the Americas produce the silver, so the West is safe. We are friendly with Mexico. We are friendly with Peru. This is a dangerous illusion. Yes, the rock comes from the Americas, but rock is not metal. When a mine in Mexico blasts rock out of the ground, they don't produce shiny 1,000-ounce bars ready for the COMEX. They produce concentrate. This is a dirty, heavy, toxic gray powder that contains maybe 10% or 20% silver mixed with lead, zinc, arsenic, and sulfur. To turn that toxic powder into 999 fine silver, you need a smelter. And guess who has spent the last 20 years building the world's largest, most efficient, and dirtiest smelting capacity? China. The story of how the West lost control of silver processing is the story of environmental regulation and short-sighted capitalism. Smelting is a nasty business. It requires massive amounts of energy, It produces sulfur dioxide and heavy metal waste. It is ugly. In the 1990s and 2000s, the United States and Europe decided they didn't want this industry anymore. The EPA regulations became stricter. The energy costs rose. One by one, the great smelters of the West shut down. The Asarco smelter in El Paso gone. The Trail smelter in Canada is one of the few left, but it can't handle the world's volume alone. Meanwhile, China said, "We will take it." They built massive industrial zones dedicated to metallurgy. They subsidized the electricity. They ignored the smog. And they offered to buy the concentrate from global miners at a premium, so the supply chain shifted. A miner in Mexico digs up the silver. But instead of refining it in Mexico or Texas, they load the concentrate onto a bulk carrier ship. That ship sails across the Pacific to a port in Shandong or Hainan province. The Chinese smelter processes it. They extract the lead, the zinc, the gold, and the silver. And here's the kicker. Possession is 9/10 and of the law. Once that concentrate lands in China, the silver inside it is under Chinese jurisdiction. It enters the Chinese system. If the CCP decides that strategic metals cannot leave the country, that silver is stuck. It doesn't matter that it was mined in Mexico by a Canadian company. It is now sitting in a Chinese warehouse. The West effectively outsourced the keys to its own vault. We gave them the ore, and now we have to beg to buy back the metal. This dynamic creates what I call the toll road trap. China acts as the toll booth for the global metals market. Even if they don't consume the silver, they process it. Usually, they re-export a lot of it. They sell the bars back to London or New York, but in a shortage, the toll booth closes. China has already demonstrated this capability with copper and rare earths. They have built so much capacity that they can process more material than the world produces. This gives them monopsony power. They are the biggest buyer of raw concentrate. This allows them to dictate terms to the miners. We will buy your concentrate, but only if you sign a long-term contract. We will invest in your mine, but we get the offtake rights. This is why you see Chinese state-owned enterprises buying stakes in junior miners in South America and Africa. They are securing the feed for their smelters. They are locking up the supply at the source. Why don't we just build new smelters in America? This is the logical question. If we are vulnerable, we should fix it, but we can't. Or at least we can't do it fast enough. To build a new polymetallic smelter in the United States today is a bureaucratic nightmare. First, you need the permits, air quality, water quality, land use. That takes 5 to 7 years. Then you face the lawsuits. Environmental groups will sue to stop toxic pollution. Then you need the capital. A smelter costs billions. And finally, you need the energy. Smelters need cheap, consistent base load power. With the US grid transitioning to intermittent wind and solar, industrial electricity rates are skyrocketing. It would take 10 years to rebuild a domestic smelting capacity that could rival China's. We don't have 10 years. The Samsung battery technology is here now. The solar demand is here now. The squeeze is happening in 2025, not 2035. This is the green wall. Ironically, the same environmental regulations that demand we build solar panels and EVs are the regulations that prevent us from processing the silver needed to build them. We have regulated ourselves into a corner. This refinery dominance explains the mystery of the draining vaults. For the last 3 years, we have seen silver inventory plummet in the LBMA and COMEX. Where is it going? It is going to the east. But it's not just investors buying coins. It is the structural flow of the supply chain moving to where the smelters are. As Western smelters closed or reduced capacity, the physical center of gravity shifted. The London fixed price is set based on bars in London. But if the new bars are being produced in Hainan, China, and they aren't being shipped to London, the London vaults drain, and once they are empty, the pricing mechanism breaks. We are seeing the consequences of 30 years of industrial neglect. You cannot run a financialized precious metals market without the physical metal. And you cannot have the physical metal if you don't have the factories to purify it. This puts the friendly supplier narrative at risk. The US government talks about friendshoring, only buying from allies like Mexico or Canada. But if Mexico's silver has to go to China to be refined, it isn't friendly supply anymore. It is captured supply. Unless the US can convince Mexico to stop shipping concentrate to China, or unless the US subsidizes massive new refineries in North America, which is too slow, the bottleneck remains. China has his thumb on the windpipe of the silver market. They don't have to squeeze hard. Just a little pressure, a delay in export licenses, a quota reduction, and the West gasps for air. If the smelter is the choke point, the solar panel is the motive. To understand why China is moving to block silver exports, you have to look at their national strategy. China does not want to be the world's mine. They do not want to be the world's refiner anymore. They want to be the world's factory. Specifically, they want to own the energy infrastructure of the 21st century. In the 20th century, if you controlled oil, you controlled the world. In the 21st century, if you control the manufacturing of green energy tech, you control the world. China has achieved a level of dominance in the solar industry that is terrifying to Western planners. They control roughly 80% of the global manufacturing capacity for every stage of the solar supply chain. Polysilicon wafers, cells, modules, they are the Saudis of solar. But this dominance has a vulnerability. Solar panels are not made of magic, they are made of materials. The single most expensive non-negotiable material in a solar cell is silver. Put yourself in the shoes of a central planner in Beijing. You have a choice. You have a stockpile of refined silver in your vaults. Option A, you can export that silver bar to London for $60 an ounce, you get cash. Option B, you can keep that silver bar in China, turn it into silver paste, paint it onto a solar cell, build a panel, and sell that panel to Germany or the United States. Option A creates zero jobs and minimal profit. Option B employs millions of Chinese workers, dominates a strategic industry, and generates massive export revenue. It is simple math. Exporting raw resources is what colonies do. Exporting high-tech manufactured goods is what superpowers do. So as the global supply of silver tightens, why on earth would China allow a single ounce of raw silver to leave its borders? Every ounce that leaves is an ounce that cannot be turned into a solar panel. Every ounce that leaves feeds a competitor. This is the value-add logic behind the export ban. It isn't just about hoarding wealth. It is about maximizing the economic output of every gram of silver. By trapping the silver inside China, they artificially lower the domestic price for their manufacturers, while sending the global price skyrocketing for everyone else. The timing of this is critical because of the technology shift we have discussed before. TOPCon tunnel oxide passivated contact. The Chinese solar industry has aggressively pivoted to this new standard. TOPCon panels are more efficient, but they use 20% to 50% more silver than the old PERC panels. This pivot has created a massive internal hunger for silver within China. In 2023 alone, the Chinese solar sector consumed nearly 200 million ounces of silver. That is roughly 25% of the entire global mine supply consumed by one industry in one country, and they are expanding. China's solar installation targets for 2025 and 2030 are staggering. They are installing more solar in a single year than the US has installed in its history. To hit those targets, they need silver. They need all of it. If they have to compete with Samsung and the US Mint and India on the open market, the price goes to the moon. But if they close the borders, if they say China's silver stays in China, they secure their supply. This brings us to the weaponization aspect. The United States and Europe are desperately trying to rebuild their own solar manufacturing. The Inflation Reduction Act in the US pumps billions of dollars into subsidies for factories to build solar panels in America. Companies like First Solar and Hanwha Q-Cells are building massive plants in Ohio, Georgia, and Arizona. But a factory is useless without raw materials. These US factories need silver paste. Where does the silver paste come from? Mostly China. And even if they try to source it elsewhere, the global price is set by the availability of metal. If China blocks silver exports, the cost of silver for US manufacturers explodes. It makes American solar panels uncompetitively expensive. It forces the West to continue buying finished Chinese panels because they are cheaper. It is a ruthless strategy. Hoard the raw material, starve the competitors, maintain the monopoly on the finished product. China is willing to sacrifice the short-term profit of selling silver to ensure the long-term dominance of the energy grid. They are playing chess. The West is playing checkers. This aligns perfectly with President Xi Jinping's strategy of dual circulation. The idea is to make China self-reliant internal circulation while making the rest of the world dependent on China external circulation. Silver is the perfect candidate for this. By keeping silver internal, they support their internal circulation. By exporting solar panels, they dominate the external circulation. This puts the Western investor in a precarious position. The silver you see on the comics is the leftover silver. It is the silver that China hasn't bought yet. It is the silver that hasn't been swallowed by the solar Leviathan. But the Leviathan is hungry. And with the news of Samsung's battery tech adding another layer of demand, China knows the window to secure cheap metal is closing. The export restrictions are the lock on the door. They are saying we are entering a resource-constrained world. We have the factories. We have the smelters. We are keeping the metal. Imagine being a procurement manager for a solar company in Germany right now. You see the headlines. China reviews strategic mineral exports. Samsung announces silver-heavy battery. Refineries halted. You look at your inventory. You have 3 weeks of silver paste left. What do? You panic. You call your supplier and say, double the order. The supplier says, I can't. The price is up and supply is tight. You say, I don't care about the price. Just get it. This is how the commercial squeeze begins. It isn't speculators buying calls on Robinhood. It is industrial giants fighting for survival. And China is sitting back arms crossed, watching the scramble, knowing their warehouses are full. The implication of this goes beyond the silver price. If silver skyrockets, solar energy gets more expensive. The deflationary nature of green tech reverses. The transition to net zero becomes inflationary. This is why silver is the Achilles heel of the green agenda. Policymakers assumed the cost of solar would go down forever. They assumed raw materials were infinite. They were wrong. As China creates this solar monopoly backed by a silver hoard, the cost of energy for the West will rise and the wealth transfer will accelerate. From the West, which prints paper, to the East, which holds the atoms, we have analyzed the consumers. We have looked at China and the United States. We have seen how the battle for technological dominance is driving them to hoard metal. But there is a third player in this war. A player that has been silent for too long, but is finally waking up: the producers. If you look at a map of global silver production, you see a massive concentration in Latin America. Mexico is number 1. Peru is usually number 2 or 3. Chile and Bolivia are major players. Together, this region controls the tap. For a century, their relationship has been colonial. Foreign companies go to Mexico, they dig up the silver. They pay a small royalty to the government. They export the profit to Toronto or New York, and they export the metal to China for processing. Mexico gets the holes in the ground and the low-wage jobs. The West gets the wealth, the East gets the industrial power. That deal is dead. As the price of silver rises, driven by the Samsung demand and the Chinese blockade, the governments of Latin America are watching. They see silver trading at $60, $70, $80, and they are asking a very dangerous question. Why are we letting foreigners take our national treasure for pennies? We are witnessing a tidal wave of resource nationalism sweeping across the global south. It started with lithium. Chile nationalized its lithium industry. Mexico created a state-run lithium company. Now it is moving to copper and silver. The logic is simple. If silver is a strategic energy metal, if it is the key to the green transition, then it is a matter of national security. Why would Mexico allow a Canadian company to export a strategic asset to China when Mexico could control it? We are seeing the early signs of a silver OPEC. OPEC changed the world in the 1970s. A group of oil-producing nations banded together, restricted supply, and demanded a higher price. They brought the West to its knees. Silver is ripe for the same move. The concentration of production is actually higher in silver than in oil. A handful of countries control the primary supply. If Mexico, Peru, and Bolivia decided to coordinate, if they announced a unified export tax on silver, or if they demanded that silver be refined domestically before export, the global supply chain would shatter. You don't even need full nationalization to wreck the market. You just need taxes. Governments love windfall profit taxes. They look at a mining company making record profits because of a price spike, and they say that profit belongs to the people. Here's the scenario. Silver hits $80. A miner in Mexico has a cost of production of $20. They are making $60 profit per ounce. The Mexican government steps in and says, "We are implementing a 75% tax on any price above $30. Suddenly, the miner keeps almost none of the upside. The government takes it all. This changes the economics of the miner pivot we discussed in previous videos. This is why jurisdiction is the most important word in your vocabulary. A mine in Mexico might produce a lot of silver, but if the government takes 90% of the cash flow, the stock is worthless. A mine in Nevada might produce less silver, but if the US government wants to encourage domestic supply, they might offer tax breaks instead of taxes. This creates a massive divergence. The political risk discount applied to Latin American miners will explode. The safe haven premium applied to North American miners will skyrocket. Why would Mexico do this? Retaliation. If China blocks the export of refined silver and the US blocks the export of high-tech chips, Mexico realizes it is being squeezed between two superpowers. Their only leverage is the rock. They know that the US auto industry relies heavily on Mexican silver. By threatening the supply, Mexico gains leverage in trade negotiations. Silver becomes a poker chip. We are already seeing the friction. Foreign miners are facing delays in permits. They are facing new environmental laws that look suspiciously like soft expropriation. The message is clear. If you want our silver, you will pay our price. What does this do to the price of silver? It raises the floor. In a free market, the price floor is determined by the cost of production. If it costs $20 to mine an ounce, the price rarely stays below $20 for long. But if the government adds a $30 tax, the new cost of production is $50. The price cannot drop below $50 or the mine's close. Resource nationalism is inflationary. It artificially raises the cost of goods to capture more value for the state. This means that even if demand dips, which it won't, the price of silver has a new artificial bottom. The days of $20 silver are gone. Not just because of geology, but because of tax policy. This creates a hostage situation for the industrial users. Samsung needs silver. China is hoarding the refined bars. Mexico is taxing the raw ore. The supply chain is being squeezed from both ends. The refiner and the miner are both demanding more. Who pays? The consumer and the investor who didn't buy early. This dynamic destroys the efficiency of the global market. It creates friction. Friction means higher prices. It means that silver will trade at different prices in different parts of the world. Mexican silver might have a different export tariff than Peruvian silver. Chinese silver might be unobtainable at any price. We are watching the death of globalism in the metals market. For 40 years we believed in just-in-time delivery and global sourcing. Now we are moving to just-in-case hoarding and regional blocks. The Americas block has the raw material. The Asian block has the processing and manufacturing. These two blocks are decoupling. If you are an investor, you have to understand where your silver is. If you own a mining stock, where's the hole in the ground? Is it in a country that is friendly to the West? Or is it in a country that is about to join the silver OPEC? This is why I warned you about jurisdictional risk. When the price hits $100, greed takes over. Governments are just as greedy as hedge funds. They will rewrite the mining codes. They will tear up contracts. They will do whatever it takes to keep the wealth at home. So, we have technological demand explosion, refining choke point, resource nationalism. These three forces are converging right now, and they are converging on a pricing mechanism that is fundamentally broken. The London Fix, the COMEX futures. These systems were designed for a world of abundant supply and free trade. They were not designed for a resource war. We have reached the final chapter of this investigation. We have traced the silver war from the laboratories of Samsung through the smelters of China into the solar factories of the East and down into the mines of Latin America. All of these forces, technology, refining dominance, resource nationalism, are converging on a single point. They are converging on the mechanism that tells us what silver is worth. And that mechanism is about to break. For over a century, the price of silver has been determined in two places: London and New York. The London Bullion Market Association sets the daily fix. The COMEX in New York trades the futures contracts that set the spot price. These systems rely on one fundamental assumption: trust. Trust that the metal exists. Trust that it can be delivered. Trust that money can buy atoms. But in a resource war, trust evaporates. When China blocks exports, when Mexico taxes production, when Samsung bypasses the open market to buy direct, the flow of metal to London and New York stops. We are witnessing the death of the Western pricing mechanism. We are watching the scepter of power pass from the paper markets of the West to the physical markets of the East. And the result will be a price dislocation so violent it will make 1980 look like a warm-up. Imagine you have a thermometer in your house. It says it is 70, but the house is on fire. The walls are melting. Why does the thermometer say 70? Because the thermometer is broken. It is stuck. The spot price of silver is a broken thermometer. It is measuring the sentiment of paper traders in New York who are betting on price direction, using 20.1 leverage. It is not measuring the physical reality of a solar panel manufacturer in Shanghai who cannot find silver paste. As the physical supply gets locked up behind the green wall of export bans and taxes, the COMEX becomes irrelevant. If you hold a COMEX contract and you ask for delivery and the COMEX says, "Sorry, we have no metal because China isn't selling and Mexico is hoarding," what is that contract worth? It is worth the cash value, but cash is not silver. This is the force majeure scenario we warned about. The paper market will continue to trade. It might even trade at a low price, but the connection to reality will be severed. You will see a spot price of $50 and a street price of $100. The paper market becomes a zombie, walking, talking, but dead inside. So where will the real price be discovered? Look east, the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Unlike the West, which trades promises, the SGE is built on delivery. It is a cash for metal market. Because China is the ultimate consumer, the metal flows there. And because the metal flows there, the truth is found there. For months, we have seen the Shanghai Premium, where silver trades significantly higher in China than in London. Western analysts call this an arbitrage anomaly. They think it will close. They are wrong. It is not an anomaly. It is the real price. The lower price in the West is the anomaly. It is a paper discount caused by empty vaults and leverage. As the resource war escalates, the Shanghai price will become the global reference. Miners in Peru won't look at the COMEX close anymore. They will look at the Shanghai close. They will say, "Why should I sell to New York for X when Shanghai pays plus $5? This gravity is inescapable. The pricing power moves to the buyer with the biggest wallet and the biggest hunger. That buyer is China. But there's another layer to this war, a monetary layer. We cannot talk about silver without talking about the death of the dollar standard. The BRICS nations are actively trying to dollarize. They are building trade networks that settle in local currencies or commodities. China and Russia are trading oil for gold. India is buying oil with rupees. Where does silver fit in? Silver is the people's money. While central banks hoard gold, the populations of India and China hoard silver. In a world where fiat currencies are being weaponized, physical metal is the only neutral asset. China knows that by hoarding silver, they aren't just securing a battery metal. They are securing a hard asset reserve. If the dollar collapses or if the US sanctions China, a warehouse full of silver is better than a warehouse full of treasury bonds. This adds a monetary premium on top of the industrial premium. Silver is being squeezed by industry and by monetary panic. It is the only asset that sits at the intersection of the two massive trends of our time: the green transition and the death of fiat. So, what does the future look like? We are heading toward a dual market. Market A, the official market. This is the regulated government-controlled price. It might be suppressed. It might be taxed. It is the price you see on CNBC, It is the price the government pays when they seize metal for national defense. Market B, the shadow market. This is the free market. This is the price in Shanghai. This is the price at your local coin shop. This price reflects reality, and it will be much, much higher than market A. We saw this in the Soviet Union. We see it in Argentina today. The official rate and the blue rate. Smart investors operate in the shadow market. They hold the physical asset. Fools stay in the official market. They hold the ETF or the unallocated account. When the split happens, when the export bans lock the gates, you want to be holding the asset that trades in market B because market A is a trap. We have covered a lot of ground in this series. Let's summarize the investment thesis of the battery war. Number 1, the tech is real. The silver carbon anode is not hype. It is chemistry. It guarantees that demand will remain inelastic and exponential. Number 2, the supply is broken. The refinery choke point in China and the geological wall in mining mean supply cannot respond to price. Number 3, the politics are hostile. Resource nationalism in Mexico and Peru means the government will take a bigger piece of the pie, effectively raising the price floor. Number 4, the price is wrong. The Western paper market is broken and is being replaced by Eastern physical pricing. What do you do? Step 1, get physical. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. In a trade war, counterparty risk is the killer. If China blocks exports, the ETF based in London might declare force majeure. The bar in your safe does not declare force majeure. Step 2, audit your miners. Look at your portfolio. Do you own miners in unsafe jurisdictions? Sell them. Move to North America. Move to Australia. Look for the unhedged producers. You want exposure to the squeeze, not the fixed price. Step 3, ignore the noise. The banks will try to smash the paper price. They will raise margins. The media will ignore the shortage. Do not let them shake you out. Look at the Samsung factory. Look at the Chinese export data. Look at the Mexican tax code. Those are the signals. The price ticker is the noise. The battery war has begun. The first shots have been fired in the form of export reviews and refining quotas. Most people won't realize the war started until the shelves are empty. We are entering a period of history where access is more important than price. It doesn't matter if you can afford silver at $100 if there is none for sale. The window to acquire this strategic asset is closing. The gates are swinging shut. You have the information. You understand the battlefield. Now the move is yours.